Jon Summers is the motoring historian. He was a company car thrashing technology sales rep that turned into a fairly inept sports bike rider. Hailing from California, he collects cars and bikes built with plenty of cheap and fast, and not much reliable. On his show, he gets together with various co hosts to talk about new and old cars, driving, motorbikes, motor racing, and motoring travel.
Good morning, good day, good afternoon, wherever, whatever time or wherever you may be. It is Jon Summers, the motoring historian, with his school friend Mark AMI for another hour or hour and a half or however long we feel to talk a load of bollocks about cars, kind of about cars. How are you, Mark?
I'm all right, thank you, sir. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. We've had some stormy weather here in San Francisco, and the weather has got out nice again. And there was a whole 2 weeks that went by where the road was wet, and I didn't want to ride motorcycles, so I would look at the weather forecast and then be like, and it's only as I say this to you now, I think that's so bloody California to be like, oh, I just wait for a sunny day to ride. Because in England, I just used to get out and ride anyway. But I guess it's a combination of my old age and an increased sense of security and responsibility and all of that jazz.
Mate, I'm a fair weather rider. I'm a portly old git now, and I'm waiting for the blue skies myself. So, although I am going to get a dirt bike at some point soon, and then I will ride that whenever. So,
yeah,
on green lanes, not on the road. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still trying to persuade Dana to acquiesce to Ollie riding. He was doing his goalkeeping practice in Sutro Park the other day, and some 5-year-old came by on an electric bike, an electric dirt bike, right? And I just want to highlight, right, that I think at the moment, both legally and culturally, there is a gap at the moment around electric bikes, right? So, in other words, if I buy Ollie one of these $400 two-stroke Chinese but 50cc bikes that you see on Amazon for $300 or $400, right? If I buy him one of those, I'd have to go and pick it up in Nevada because they're not allowed in California. But let's say I shipped it to a PO box in Nevada or something, and then went and picked it up, and he could have it here. If he had that running around in Sutro Heights, right, somebody would call the police on him in no time at all, right? On me, right? Whereas this lad on the electric bike, because it's quiet, because it doesn't have clouds of blue smoke, he's just a little kid riding around on the electric bike. So Ollie was like, well, can I get an electric bike then? So I was like looking at prices and sizes and so on, because he's a bit bigger now. And I came to the conclusion that no, basically, because if I put him on an electric bike, that bike would be like the size of a KLX 110 or something like that now, like the electric bike would be. And that would be too big, right? That would be, the old woman walking her little yappy dogs. Instead of being like, oh, cute, the lad's riding over the berms, it would be, you're going to run me and my dogs over. And, given how Ollie is on a pedal bike, I know how he'd be on a powered bike. So, he has this skid every time, right? When he comes to stop, he always steers a bit and then gets the brake on. So he does like a bit of speedway, right? He's going to fall off, right? But I told him that a month ago, and he's just been doing bigger and bigger and bigger skids and not falling off. So, what does Dad know?
Well, those 44 teeth boys, Al did his review, didn't he, of the, was it a KTM 50cc or something like that versus the equivalent electric dirt bike? And his lad was basically pro electric.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I was thinking. I've been driving the Mercedes. There's that old E55 I have, and it's so smooth, and the power is so instantaneous. and it has this sort of, I mean, that's why Jason's son called it the flying couch. I mean, it has that feel, right? All those characteristics are the characteristics of electric cars. It's like when Cadillac said they were going all electric, and they were one of the first makers to do it. Instead of being like, oh, what a disaster, I was like, well, those are the virtues of Cadillac anyway, the smoothness. And, I'm put in mind of, before the war, the Packards and the Duesenbergs and the Cadillacs of that era. The idea was that you couldn't hear it running. It was silent running. So the reason that you did 12 cylinders wasn't because it made more power because you could rev higher. It was because it delivered better torque and it was smoother and it was quieter. And the notion was that you could rest a quarter on the engine block, and the quarter wouldn't fall over. The thing was so smooth. I feel like we moved away from that true luxury, that notion of true luxury. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's the whole. I mean, electric is coming. It is the future, or whether and it looks like it's unlikely to segue sideways into hydrogen anytime soon. Even though that might be a better. The specific impulse looks too output or whatever it is looks a bit too weak. But again, I listened to a radio show today on the BBC talking on Radio 4, sliced bread, I think, as in, like, is it the best thing since? And they ask, sort of answer readers' questions. And even if you charge up your electric car at home and your previous car was, beyond economical repair, so there isn't the argument about whether or not you needed to buy one, you're still looking at between 50 and 80,000 miles if you only charge up at home, before you save the differential in cost between an electric car, electric Astra, and the equivalent, small diesel, which is a lot. And if you're not in that position to actually need to swap out now, there's no argument to do it. And the net is that if you look around, ignoring all of the economics, and of course, now with the petrol prices gone through the roof, you can be paying 70p a kilowatt unit or whatever it is now, at service stations and so forth. And there was 4-hour queues for the Tesla chargers at Christmas time at the service stations on the way down, when people were heading home. The infrastructure is woefully lacking behind the governmental ambition, sadly. So it's
I would completely agree with you there that the infrastructure is not there. I'd also put to you, and stop me if you think you've heard this one before, but I also put to you that I feel like the people who buy electric cars are the people who are least able to cope with motoring challenges, which are constituent of the electric car experience. So in other words, you need to plan where you're going to stop. You can't just drive and get there and gas up whenever. We've rolled back the convenience. And I was thinking about this with my mum, that when we were at school together, my mum didn't drive. And given that she has done since and gets on well and loves modern cars, my parents have a Volkswagen Tiguan, still like a 2016. She loves that. She loves the sitting up high. She loves the smoothness of the diesel. She loves the fact that it's an automatic transmission, but it's not slow. All of that stuff, right? That all happened. She didn't like the lights. She didn't like the choke. The choke terrified her. Between the choke and the clutch, you took those two things away. It made my mum mobile. It made my parents able to live out in the countryside. So, I feel like electrification has sort of rolled motoring back to the way that it was.
It's not for that, is it? I mean, or at least at the moment, in the sense that if you live outside of town and you do long journeys semi-regularly, it's not for you.
Yeah. It's definitely not.
Commute, short run regularity.
Yeah. And that's why, we've on our agenda of cars to talk about, but that's what I think's most interesting about a car that's not on our agenda to talk about, the Citroën AMI. Because that AMI is like, I know it's like made out of the same material as a porta potty's made out of.
Oh, the Ollie.
No, the AMI. The
Oh,
AMI
right.
is the little one. The Ollie's the one on our list that we can talk
Okay.
about in a minute.
I don't think
That-
I've even seen the AMI.
oh well, let's talk about the Ollie. And whilst we're talking about the Ollie, you look at the AMI.
Right.
Our little agenda was about electric cars today anyway, and we're jumping around on the agenda, but that's you and me. I
Oh, I
love
have seen that one. Yeah, sorry. It's quite cute.
yeah. So I think both of them are fucking awesome design. I get what Lucid and Rivian are trying to do, but I'm just a bit like that feels a bit like I'm excited for the next Model T. It's the next Model T that really excites me, and it excites me in the way that when I used to sell tech products, I was interested in what the next generation tech could do. And
Yeah.
I hated Tesla, partly because I just didn't know what to make of them. I just didn't know how to interpret them when they first came along, because it was fast, but without the fun, without the viscerality. It was, they had looked at what Porsche did and just did jelly mold size. And you were like, well, that's because Porsche are all about the 911. They have this like halo model. What's your halo model other than your founder's goddamn giant ego? I just
Yeah, you're waiting for the skyline. Do you know what I mean? You're waiting for the
yeah.
Japanese to go.
I
This
was
is how we do it, and then you go, well, shit, that's effective. I like that. That's amazing. That's your own. You're not trying to be Ferrari.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I
the
completely
skyline
agree.
being the ultimate expression of the Japanese, instead not copying anymore, but
No.
doing something terrific, all of
Yeah,
themselves.
just amazing, all on its own. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, I suppose it shouldn't have been a surprise that it came from Citroën. But yeah, I watched a review of that. I mean, and it's a show car, it's a sort of laboratory thing, but I mean, it's genuinely impressive. Loads of quality, cool and different thinking for the Ollie. I haven't watched the AMI stuff, but they had a couple on the picture, and I thought
The
that was cute.
philosophy is the same. The philosophy is the same. Instead of, do you know how heavy the Rivian is? It's like 7,900 pounds, right? It's like I said to Ollie, like that's 3 Mustangs, 3 of our Mustangs. He went 3. I went 3. Imagine how that would feel plowing into you at 100 miles an hour.
And that was the main standout thing for that Ollie. It's like what, 2,200 pounds?
Yeah.
It's like 1,000 kilograms.
Bright windscreen and the doors and all of that. All of that's fucking clever. But the main event about that Ollie is that it's about lightness.
Well, and also they reckon because they can put a smaller, was it a 70 kilowatt hour battery or something in there, so therefore they can make the thing for 20 grand. Like 20 grand. That's like actually the price of a Golf rather than that plus 15 grand more. I mean,
now I'm excited about electric car, right? Tesla. Now we're really, and you said it came from Citroën. I looked at it being like, I'm feeling the Citroën 2CV here. The AMI was launched right alongside when Paris introduced their new 19 mile an hour speed limit, right? It's 30 kilometers or something.
Okay.
And I'm like, wow, Citroën have grasped the reality of urban transportation in the future. With that,
the Ollie's doesn't do any more than 69. That's it.
Well, the AMI's even slower than that.
Yeah.
And what they've done is they've done one vehicle for people who live right in the city, and they've done another vehicle or for people who might want to go out of town at the weekend, but this is this is what I believe. I don't know France and French people very well, but in California, our friends that we spent New Year's with, that we're going to talk about their couple of new cars, Tesla Model X and Cayenne GTS later in the sort of little presentation in our little thing today. But, they would never drive, even though they would never consider driving between LA and San Francisco. You would fly. So, in other words, any journey that's longer than a couple of 100 miles, most people don't want to do it. In the pandemic, my wife moved to a stage where she doesn't want to be in the car for longer than about an hour. She's fine driving around town, but she doesn't know when she gets out on the freeway, she doesn't know what to do. Now, me, I'm like waiting for that moment where you can just sit there and, you know, survey the world. Like, I feel like that's like the big, I love nothing more than that moment when you're going somewhere and the car's packed and all the bullshit's done and you're just like out on the highway. That moment where you move into the left-hand lane and switch the cruise on, that's a pinnacle moment. That's a sports bike picking up the front wheel moment right there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, let's see what, like, you know, Planet Rock's got, or a bit of Smooth Country. If I'm feeling like US vibes today, then, you know, let's see what's going on.
Yeah, that's not what
that's not what most people do, to be fair.
And that's not what these electric cars are designed for. That's not what they're designed for.
No, and I mean, look, you know, maybe what's that new Mercedes long tail thing that's like going for 1,000 kilometers of range on a single battery charge or something. I mean, it's ugly, but like whatever. I mean, you know, it's a technology showcase thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's coming. But
yeah, you think about that's the top thing on our list, Carter, on our list to talk about, that funky cat aura, which at that time I'd not seen the Ollie, so didn't know what the Europeans were doing. I'd only seen Mercedes kind of doing that EQS blobby affair. That cat aura, you can go buy that right now. It's 25 grand in England, something like that. You can't get it here. I am struck by it because I feel like electrification is going to be the niche that the Chinese need to build a market in Europe and later dominate. I feel
and I don't think they've delivered their Skyline. I don't know what their cars are, you know, apart from copies at the moment.
They definitely haven't delivered the Skyline. The Cat Aura is like a step on the road. And the Cat Aura sits really nicely against the Ollie because the Ollie has all this exciting design that's at an affordable price point, whereas the Cat Aura is at a similar price point, right? You know, that concept car is not, you know, I see those as similarly priced kind of well, the Cat Aura is something you can buy right now, right?
I have to say, I thought it was a bit dull. I mean, the guy seemed quite excited about it in the video in terms of its styling, but, you know, trying to look like, you know, sort of take Porsche styling cues on that sort of little car always feels like you're sort of fronting and maxing a bit. Yeah. I mean, like, really?
Just for our listeners, or one of them, me, whilst I'm editing it, just for our listeners, Johnny Smith, Late Break Show, and he's my electric car guru. You know, and I realized he verbalized what I'd been thinking, which is that this antagonism between electrification and gas power is dumb. It's just dumb. There's room for everything, right? So he's like electric car guy. He's testing a VW Buzz at the moment, but he has a 68 Charger, which in England, you know, probably wouldn't be my choice, but like, you know, power to him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's coming. I think it's got a use case. I mean, it really has. I mean, it doesn't fit my use case, but that I'm in a minority. I'm not the motoring public at large. So, yeah. I mean, and you know, if I lived in town, you don't want to be starting up a straight six every time with a noisy exhaust every time you leave the house. I mean, it's a bit silly, isn't it? So you know, it's. But I don't. So, you know, man, most of the times we take the Fiesta, but pottering around anyway. So,
yeah. So I'm just looking at our agenda here. So whilst we're on the theme of these electrics, another unusual thing, I would go so far as to say bloody stupid thing, is the fact that you pay a premium, like between the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Kia EV6, or the EV6 and the EV6 GT. That's the two. EV6, EV6 GT, and Mustang Mach-E and Mach-E GT. The GT models deliver more performance for a higher price, right? So far, so normal. But they deliver less range.
Yeah, but people always wanted to dick measure, didn't they? I mean, it's like, you know, they want to go out and sit on the lights and show off to their boss how fast it can go.
You could use when you know, when you dick measured your Cortina 2-litre gear against your colleague's 1.6L, there was like, a tangible velour sunroof and 95 miles an hour instead of 90 difference, right? There was a tangible difference. I don't believe the difference in performance of electric vehicles is remotely tangible. I don't believe you can use it. I can't use all my Fiesta ST on the road.
No, you
Let
definitely
alone.
can't use the M2. I mean, but you can get away with the traffic light Grand Prix a bit better, I guess, given it's quiet.
But I don't want. I'm a performance vehicle enthusiast, and I don't want the GT variety of it, because I don't want to be worried. I'm more worried about range than I am about half a second off my 0 to 60 time.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, very much so.
So why would you do the GT model? It's total dick measuring.
Yeah.
Well, utter dick measuring. And it was stupid with gas-powered cars, but we love them and we're small boys. But now they're electric. It's like, it seems like it's like a throwback to.
But that was one of Tesla's main selling points, wasn't it? That it's faster. That you could have electric, but it's quick, and it looked like a boring blobby sedan, but it was faster than like a Ferrari. That was one of their things. I mean,
yeah, maybe they success. You see, I just feel this is a different technology, right? And I used to feel that I just wasn't enthusiastic about it, but then I think maybe it was because Johnny Smith did a video on that Cat Aura months and months ago, like maybe more than a year ago. And that was the beginning of me thinking, you know what, there's like the stirrings of something interesting happening here. And that Citroën Ollie, and there's other vehicles like that that we could talk about, but that Citroën Ollie, the AMI is what they've always done really well. It's like, it's like it looks like a disabled porta potty on wheels. That's what it looks
funky
like.
alloys.
The AMI does. But the Ollie is like, wow, we can actually do good design. Because BMW, these electric BMWs, I mean, they're goddamn ugly. And they're just big fat bastards that you just, with a bunch of performance that you don't need and aren't going to use. It just feels a bit bloody pretentious to me. But, well, dick measury, and I'm not a dick measury kind of guy.
No,
so
if they don't make them light, then the range is a problem. We're planning another couple of holidays this year. Angie's still waiting for her operation. Therefore, it's probably going to be in the car. Therefore, I'm probably going to be doing, 500 plus miles a day for at least a few days, and I'm not stopping 3 times for a couple of hours at the service station. Like
the irony that these vehicles with a range similar to one of my sports bikes, like you need to be gassing up as much as that, and it's called the GT. I mean, the whole notion of the GT is what Harry Garage's guy does. Is you have your yacht down in Antibes, you get in the car in the morning in your farm in England, you drive down there, you don't stop, you gas up. That's all. Yeah, it's. Hey, so why don't we move on to the Ferrari Purasang? Now, you put this on our little agenda. I don't even know how to spell it. You had some piece about its suspension or steering. I would just preface my remarks by saying, yeah, all right, Ferrari SUV, vaffanculo. But I also feel you need to see these things in the flesh, really, to get a real proper sense of it. You also need to experience it in the butt somewhat. And I know from driving that 07 or whatever it was Durango that had the Hemi, I mean, it looked ugly. It was terrible. And when you sat in it, the interior and everything was terrible. And it was all absolutely horrendous, other than that moment where you came in the throttle and the V8 pulled it along, and that elevated the whole experience. The whole thing was, it wasn't like it was the V8. It was just that moment where you tipped into the gas that it elevated it far beyond any other SUV that of comparable SUV. So the Purasang, like I get powerful SUVs is what I'm saying, but you
Yeah.
couldn't pay me to have a Cullinan or a Bentiaga.
I mean, I don't want one. This is to be clear. But what I was most interested in, I watched a couple of videos on it. Just Harry did one. I think I watched another or part of another one. The most interesting thing I thought on there was, I mean, apart from the fact they're big now, some of these cars. I think it's got 24-inch rims on the back and 23 on the front. I mean, that's a big ass wheel. Given older DRE was singing about 20-inch rims not that long ago, and they were big ass wheels, and now
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But he was also singing about his 98 Oldsmobile, which then was a $500 Beta, and now is a full-on collector car.
Yeah, find one if you can. I mean, the most interesting thing about it, I think, is apart from the fact that obviously everything on it's an option, but I thought the suspension was really interesting. That there's no anti-roll bars, so the way they manage compression and so forth, and suspension travel is they've got some clever sort of little motor with the smarts on it on the stanchion of the suspension, so you can use that on each corner to independently stiffen up and change the ride height on all four corners. So if it drives over a pothole, it can lower the wheel into the pothole, and then as it comes back up, it checks the road surface like 30 times a second or something. So it can then bring it back up again so that it minimizes the amount it actually went in. So when you're hard cornering as well, it can stiffen up the outside and soften up the inside so that you can corner flat. It could lean it in, but apparently they tried that. It felt too much.
I feel like it's the 1990s and you're Murray Walker explaining Nigel Mansell's new Formula One car to me.
It's pretty sick for something on an SUV. I mean, that word is not acceptable. It's not an SUV. I don't know what Ferrari called it. I can't remember, but that's what it is. So I mean,
BMW don't build SUVs; they build SAVs, which are sports activity vehicles. I'll have you know, it's not.
Fair enough, Beamer. It's as I say, it doesn't fill me particularly with lust. I don't want one. I don't think it looks too bad. It's just interesting to see them sort of loading in, doing a Ferrari and doing it their own way. And there's an electric motor on the front and so forth, so it can do four-wheel drive, but you still get a nose lift as an option if you want to lift the front end up. So it doesn't do that for you. It's all about performance and enhancing the driving experience rather than practicality.
I've got to believe it will leave you flabbergasted to drive, because one thing with this sort of latest generation of like hypercar, of ultra powerful tall vehicles, is everything's a superlative, right? It has 700 horsepower, but the brakes are like the size of a 12-inch pizza, and the tires are like so it has the braking performance and the rubber on the road equivalent to like 3 or 4 Sierra Cosworths.
Oh yeah, right? I mean, it'd be gobsmacking. Let's not mess about. But yeah, I mean, I can't say I want one. I don't really want anything in the Ferrari range much at the moment. I'd have a 296, don't get me wrong, but that's about it. I'm not really bothered about much else. I'd still rather an older one.
Ollie and I went in Ferrari of Fort Lauderdale when we were in Florida, and I just let him wander, right? And I found myself, and I let him wander, and was made sure that the people in the place knew that I was with him, and I wasn't going to totally let him run wild. I wasn't, it wasn't like Wild Child in. But bottom line is, we end up stood next to a 512, like BB, black one, and I'm like, the modern stuff, I don't know. It's all about the scenario in which you could enjoy it. And with these things, if you drive them, you do love them. But I just don't feel the same lust for the modern stuff as I do for the older stuff. I feel a level of, I'd sell a kidney for the older stuff that I don't with the newer stuff. Um, you also put on the agenda here this TTS Racing supercharged Hayabusa,
Well, I
right?
mean,
And who
merely
are and this TTS supercharged rocket? What this is? There's some like hot rod company that do a boot.
yeah. It's TTS in the UK. They basically do modification packages for these bikes, and they're fully spec'd and tweaked, and yeah. I mean, and I put the figures on there just because it's sort of ridiculous to almost to think about the numbers. If you came out with on a top trump card 10 years ago, you'd be like, yeah, chin on. They're not real. But yeah, I mean, a 9-second quarter mile, 220 miles an hour for the supercharged Busa, and the rocket, supercharged rocket, is 270 foot-pounds of torque. I mean, are you kidding me?
You remember years ago, Newton and I went out to the Mojave Desert with our CBR 600 I've got to do land racing stuff and continually failed tech inspection, basically. Just nothing like prior planning to avoid piss poor performance, let me tell you. Whilst we were out there, one time we got talking to a couple who were, well, they ran a pair of boosters, one supercharged, one turbocharged. Both of them had gone more than 200 miles an hour. And their background was, her background was master mechanic, engine builder in the aeronautics. He built the bodies for Tomahawk missiles. They're handcrafted. That's there's like a bunch of craftsmen around, like, who fucking knew? Well, these bikes were so perfect. Well, obviously we looked at the bikes, gushed over the bikes, learned the people's stories. The bottom line is that the bike needs to be supercharged or turbocharged to do more than 200 miles an hour. You'd think out of the can, the Booster could nearly do 200 miles an hour. And, those early ones could do like 193 or 199 or whatever you believe. The bottom line is now at Bonneville, at least, where the air's thinner and where you have the traction problems, you need, or Mojave, you don't have the same thin atmosphere issues, but you still have, you need a shit ton more than 250 horse. I think if you had 370, I think it could probably do 250. Not that I'm like an expert.
Who knows? I mean, because it's an odd thing. I mean, because you can do the other way. That Alan Milliard video that I sent out of the he's custom made a Viper 8-liter V10 motorbike. I mean, that thing do 200 miles an hour. And the onboard video he showed of it was like a gentle quarter throttle run, and still knocks over 200 miles an hour. So, but I mean, it's an amazing engineering project. The guy's a genius, but it's an impractical bike. I mean, clearly, it's just way too big and long. The engine is a stress member, even. It's still massive, but it's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Sorry.
No. I was just going to say the top speed runs. Sort of, I didn't see much point in them, and then spending a day at Speed Week a few years ago on holiday. I mean, it was cool. It was great fun. So if I lived near there, I would find a reason to have some sort of project to go and do high speed runs. No question.
I was really into it years ago, and I did a bit of stuff out there on bikes, and I've thought since I would go back with cars. So I have that 5-liter Mustang, and I often knock around the notion that if you just called up Ford Racing and bought a crate 500 horse Windsor, I could pay Campbell Ford the $2,000, which is the factory rate, to do a motor swap, and that caged SN car 95 Mustang GTS, it'd probably do, I don't reckon, 200 miles an hour. But if you think of it, right, the Ferrari Daytona could do 174 with 350 horse, right? the M5, the E39 M5 can do 186 de-restricted with its 400 horse. With the 500 horse that an E60 M5 has de-restricted, that could do 206. My E55, which is 359 horse, it's an O2, the last of the like W210 blobby eye ones. That could do 175 de-restricted. It'd be a bloody terrifying prospect, let me tell you, because I know how bloody terrifying that is anywhere north of, yeah. My point being that if you buy a motor with 500 horse, the car, unless it's an aerodynamic brick, is going to be sniffing around 190 or 200 miles an hour. It's just a case of raw physics. Where it so happens that SN body style, what was that? It was the jelly bean era. It was Ford took a Fox Mustang and thought, how can we make this aerodynamic? And that was the SN95 car. So I feel like, you know, you might say, well, E60 is much more aerodynamically sophisticated than shitty old Mustang. And I might agree with you, but, you know, we'll wait and see if you taped it up properly and all of that, you know. So I've thought about that, but I've also thought, it blows a tire and it's over, right?
No, is it that worth pursuing? No, I agree with you. The idea of spinning out and rolling it doesn't appeal much.
No, well, you know, and let's be real. You know, you're the one checking the tire pressures. You're the one that missed the fact that you ran over a nail or something, which just made a little cut in the tire, but at 195 miles an hour, that little cut was a big tear, and you know you're eating hospital food despite the roll cage in it. You know, I'm too old to have upside down accidents. Is the bottom line.
That is a fair point.
So we did our New Year in Santa Barbara with this family that we've got to know quite well. I mean, I guess, you know, Dana's known the girl since she was, I say girl, I mean, middle-aged woman now, but like, you know, since they were at college in Paris together years ago. Anyway, bottom line, this is not some bloody soap opera about their family. This is about the cars that they have. So she had a Tesla Model X, right? And remember, I told you the door fell on her head, and the shoddy build quality. He is not a car guy, and he commented to me on the shoddy build quality. He's not a car guy, but he is a Porsche guy. So the comparison, I think, was quite noticeable and jarring for him. And after the door fell on her head, I mean, you're like, anyway. So I was quite surprised that she had another one. It looked at the Audi e-tron. Nah. Needs 3 rows, no 3-row BMW. It's not coming anytime soon. So, you know, the leaf was up, so she had another one, right? Now, again, right, you can do the Plaid or the Range. She was like, I bet you'd have had the Plaid. I was like, actually, no. Because of we just talked about this with the EV6 and EV6 GT and Mackie, and, you know, I was like, no, you know, I wouldn't actually. I like. So this one's grey, and the interior is noticeably nicer. I'm not somebody who really compares this stuff, but the interior on these new ones is noticeably better. But it has one of these, like, you know, Space Invader, you know, Top Gun Maverick. Steering wheels, right? Where it's not a complete wheel. It's not just squared off at the bottom. It's only like it's between 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock on one side, and you know 3 o'clock and 1 o'clock on the other side. So she was complaining about that, and we went out for a little drive. Well, I mean, we were just hanging out. So we in the time that we were there, when we were going out, I happened to be sat next to her in the passenger seat one time when we were driving. And in normal operation, it's not a thing, right? But when we were going up some winding driveway, she'd been complaining about it, but actually watching her use it, it was not like a steering wheel, but it was arguably better because you could just put your hand underneath it and push it. The whole thing was like a large PlayStation console, like controller, rather than yeah. So
I first saw that on an arcade game about 25, 30 years ago.
yeah,
That sort of hand.
yeah. You and the design genius at fucking Tesla.
Was he in Duster's Arcade in Plymouth as well? Was he?
Arcade in Plymouth. Yeah, I was thinking about Duster's Arcade in Plymouth just the other day. Why was I thinking about it? Oh, I know why I was thinking about it. Do you remember that game that was? It was like you were on a road and you had some kind of hot rod muscle car, and it was so it's like similar layout to Outrun, but it was like in a kind of science fiction neon light space, and the car was clearly a muscle car. And I remember I was looking at a new Retrowave video that reminded me of that computer game, and that computer game reminded me of being in Dusters with you and Dens, which was really seedy looking back. Dusters in Plymouth, by the way, for listeners, which has long since disappeared.
Sadly gone.
Yeah, sadly gone. The other one that you boys used to play was the fighting game, where they were like the two of you, and it was like a platformer, but it was from a like 3/4 elevated perspective.
Golden Axe.
No, it wasn't like barbarian fighting. It was like it was like a 2-player. You were like two brothers.
Yeah, you could play Golden Axe multiple player as well. But yeah, it might have been Narcs. That was the ones where that was the one where the intro was you slid in and then all did a massive skid. I think in a 911 ragtop turbo, and then you jumped out of it and then landed with your 2 SMGs or Mac-10s or whatever you were running, and then had to beat up like junkies that would throw like disease needles at you and stuff. Quality game. You could tell they were diseased because they were like bright green.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. So the other thing that he's got a new Cayenne GTS, and it's in that I want to say pewter, but I'm not sure if it is pewter. It's in this, dove grey, where it's what am I looking for? Like earth tones. If I'm not showing a bit of interior design pretension there, either way, it's an amazing color, right? It's and the thing is, I said to him, at first Ollie and I were disappointed you got rid of the Panamera, but now we're not, because it sounds better than the Panamera. And, for most of the people, most of the time in California, he's right when he says, I got the Cayenne because it's higher. It's like higher up. It's easy to get the kids in and out. My first thought was, well, you've got one bloody SUV. Why do you need another one? But the point is that people know what's right for their lifestyle. And having spent that time with them, I can see why... he was like, Ollie was like, can you put it in Sport Plus? So he did, right? But like sat behind other traffic. So he's going, and having all this like falling into potholes and having this like savage throttle response and snatching at gears, driving down the high street. And I'm like, no, this is for the motorway on ramp. This is the.
Yeah. I spent most of my time in the M2 in comfort, mostly because unless you actually want to drive. It's just, uncivilized.
Yeah. The next item on my little agenda is, I brand this as motoring historian, right? But I never actually, as I said, I feel like there's a kind of bait and switch going on. You were expecting, the history of, the Tripoli Grand Prix, and instead, you're getting us bollocksing on about new cars. Well, firstly, unlucky, and secondly, you must like it if you listen for this long. But what I was going to say was I was going to actually talk about the fact that I have done a little bit of history recently.
Mhm.
And I've not spoken to you, Mark, about this, so your reaction is genuine and unforced. There we go, breaking down that third wall again. So I wrote a piece about the Silver Arrows, the German racing cars from before the Second World War, Auto Union, kind of like modern Audi and Mercedes Benz, and really, I think the basis of modern Formula One. In that, it's like a pinnacle technical competition as a national competition. It's the traveling circus. To me, that was the beginning of the traveling circus. Now, after I wrote the paper, the person that reviewed it said they thought that was maybe present in the 1920s, and I'm now going to have to go away and do another load of research to see if I think that I just was wrong, or if I'm going to try and defend my position. And I guess that's the bottom line with this work, was that I did a lot of reading, but the reading that I did was mostly in the 1990s. And I missed this one crucial book that was published in 2008, which is basically everything that I'd written about, but of course done much better. Not least because the bloke that wrote it is German, so can read all the German language books. And the bloke reviewing my essay was like, yeah, but you basically say most of the sources are in German. I can't read German. And also, the sources that you have used, you've gone on to say, well, they're biographies that were written after the war, when the drivers and the team manager and so on, they're all trying to distance themselves from everything that was Germany in the 1930s. So, I had basically said that I felt that they'd done the different drivers that I looked at four. I basically said that I thought they'd done quite a good job of being apolitical. And the reviewer has said, on the contrary, have a look at this other book written by this German bloke who dug deeper into the past and found that, the bloke that said he'd never worn a Nazi uniform, there's a ton of pictures of him doing it. That when Rossemeyer was killed, he was like David Beckham in terms of being outside of motorsport. He was an icon in the popular imagination because he wasn't married to posh spice. He was married to a woman aviatrix, one of these like acrobatic distance flyers. Ellie Beinhorn was, anyway, whatever. The point is that she's almost more interesting than him if you read about them. The relationship's really interesting. Anyway, where was I going? I was going somewhere.
Are you talking about the source material and the chap having done deeper research and some of the stuff that they purported not being quite on the level?
Oh, the bottom line was I'd just not read the right book. And the book was published in a period where I thought I'd read just about everything there was to read. So I got egg on my face somewhat. I do feel that, and I've moved from the stage of being miffed that I'd done that, not miffed at the message or the messenger, miffed at the fact that I'd done that, to feeling, well, all right, I need to go away and do a lot of work to kind of restructure what I'm doing. And I should say, what I've tried to say is in an era of government, where government is putting pressure on people to do things that not ethical or not moral, how do people respond? And how do people who are in positions of not leadership, but positions of kind of responsibility, how do they respond to that? So I talked about von Braukich, the Mercedes driver, Caracciolo, the other Mercedes driver, and I misspelled his name throughout. Fucking embarrassing. But it's my poor attention to detail, right? I didn't Grammarly my own piece, like
Easy done, mate.
yeah. you'd think I didn't have any experience editing other people's work, wouldn't you? Herman Lang and Hans Stuck, and I guess von Braukitsch defected to East Germany after the war, and it's all a bit of a sad story. The Belgrade Grand Prix of 1939, right? 4 days after the war started, 4 days after the invasion of Poland, the morning that Neville Chamberlain declared war, Lang came down to breakfast. Neubauer, the team manager's like, "Where's Braukitsch?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know." Braukitsch gets in the car, drives to the airport. Von Braukitsch, Neubauer gets in the car, drives to the airport. Von Braukitsch is on the plane. The plane's about to take off. He pulls him off the plane and says, "You've got a race." Only subsequent, this is what he says in his biography, right? So who knows whether or not it's true. He says, "Only subsequently did I realize that the plane was going to Switzerland." So this son of the Prussian military family is, fleeing to. So you've got. So I got to think. So clearly, right, this was not somebody who drank the Nazi Kool-Aid, right? Despite the fact that he's like a Nazi poster child, despite the fact that he's appeared in a movie, with like a Hollywood actress about a racing driver, and he's a movie star. So he was the one guy, and I have a signed picture of him, right? So I feel like, which I bought 20 years ago, 25 years ago now. So he's always been the figure for me. That photograph that got me involved with the Silver Hours in the first place of the 1937 British Grand Prix. There's a photograph at Donington of the car wheeling up the hill, like it's doing a wheel stand. It's 2 wheels off the ground. That photograph is of von Braukitsch, and that's the picture that I would say didn't just get me into the Silver Hours, got me into Formula One, got me into motoring history. It all stems from that one picture. So hence my interest in von Braukitsch. Caracciolo bought a villa in Switzerland before the war, and was always like up at the villa and just stayed up at the villa. That's what he did basically. And my thought about that is that, he was the most successful driver of the era. And you can say, well, he was not as fast as Rossemeyer, and Lang was better by the end. And I think those things are absolutely true. But I feel like anybody who can come out of the whole debacle of the war and, the whole like thing as slickly as Caracciolo did, I'm reminded of the circuit that his villa in Lugano is closest to is Bern. And the feature at Bern was cobbles, and it was like fast and sweeping. If you look at a track map, a lot of the corners are kind of Thruxton churchy, but over cobbles, and it would rain a lot. So you can imagine what that was like. So anybody who can slide and 500, 600 horsepower Mercedes-Benz Grand Prix car at 150 miles an hour, which is what it took to set a decent lap time then, this was driftastic and yeah. So, and as I said, Lang's working class. Lang's a motorcycle racer, has a good career, has brothers who are killed motorcycle racing, who still has a good career. But then when the Weimar Republic collapses, loses any chance of being a racing driver, and has to like try and make ends meet and survive any way he can, ends up working for Daimler-Benz, ends up being on the Mercedes team, actually being I can't remember who's chief mechanic, but he was chief mechanic. And then in his biography, he describes this train ride back from Monza after they'd done some testing up back to Stuttgart, and sharing the carriage with him was this other mechanic, Zimmer, who he'd raced with years ago, and the car designer, and the race, and until that conversation where Zimmer and Lang had been bantering about some oil that Zimmer had borrowed for a race that they'd done like a decade before, a hill climb, like a motorcycle hill climb. Zimmer was basically Lang won everything, right? There was this period where Lang, and that's what Zimmer alluded to. The designer, whose name escapes me, heard that and from then on wanted campaign to let Lang drive the car. But the whole social class thing meant that Lang wasn't really allowed, and eventually he got there. But the first time he ever drove a Grand Prix car was the 646 horse Mercedes W125. Like that was like his introduction. There was no like Formula Ford or anything like that. There was no warm up. There was like straight out there. And the circuit, if you Google up a map of the Melhalla Tripoli Grand Prix circuit, if I tell you it was faster than Spa, faster than Monza, the average speed, and it's all like these crazy sweeping turns through, like, you know, between palm trees and so on, you know, because it's like the North African coast. It was when you know, Mussolini had his like ambitions, his colonial ambitions, and the Tripoli Grand Prix was like a showpiece. It was like a resort. It looks like, you know, Cuba used to in the 1950s. That's how it that's how it looked. He won first time out. Like unbelievable, like unbelievable. So Lang and then Stuck, and Stuck's the really interesting one because he was, his wife had a Jewish grandfather. So although officially she wasn't Jewish, the brown shirts had all these like spit on Stuck kind of campaigns going on, right? Well, you know what Stuck did, right? And this is just like eye popping, right? He wrote to Himmler and said, "Can you stop this?" So Himmler organized for it to be stopped.
I mean, okay, go to the head of the problem,
Right.
I suppose. Yeah.
Right. He went to Hitler and said, I really want to do the land speed record. You know, the Brits hold the land speed records. I'm mates with Malcolm Campbell. Like, damn it, I want to do the land speed record. And Hitler went, great, go and do it. Go and do it. I give this project my blessing. So they designed the car, this Mercedes T80. That was the if you Google that up, it looks like it's a bloody spaceship. You've never seen. The Allies, when they found it, didn't know what it was. They thought it was like a Nazi super weapon. I had no idea what it was. It was Stuck's land speed record car, and the when Stuck heard rumors that he was not going to be the driver, that you know, the people around Hitler wanted to put somebody who was, you know, like Lang, a working class hero, not, you know, foppish, you know, traveling aristocrat with a Jewish wife, who was a tennis pro, by the way. They were totally Gatsby, racing driver and tennis pro. You know, so there's a whole like social class thing going on there as well, which we see reflected in the modern era somewhat as well. Where was I going with Stuck and the
When he heard that they were going to put someone else in the car.
Oh, yeah. He went to the Berlin Motor Show because he heard Hitler was going to be there, and walked up to him and said, who's going to be driving the land speed record car? And Hitler went loudly so the whole entourage could hear, Stuck will be driving the land speed record car. In other words, he knew that Stuck's requests to see him had been denied by people in the office and so on. So when Stuck walked right up to him, eyeballed him, he said loudly, so all the brown shirts around him who were, you know, so I just thought that was interesting because it shows how, you know, it's the politics laid bare, but it also shows how Stuck wasn't really that interested in the whole, like, you know, it didn't matter what Hitler said about, you know, hating on the Jews. That didn't matter at all. It was only for me to be able to do my motor racing, don't you understand? And similarly, Caracciola, with being like, well, this is clearly a load of bollocks and this bloke's a wanker. He delivered him a Mercedes in 1926, and Hitler gabbed on a lot, and, you know, and you know, and was unimpressed. Well, at least that's what Caracciola says in his biography post-war. Pre-war, he says something slightly different, but, you know, post-war. But he was up in Switzerland, right? He wasn't exactly trying to be like, hang on a minute, I can't be involved in this. They were just about wanting to go motor racing. But the final, what I want to end with, and it's just just so telling of the time, right? Hitler says, go and see the head of the Air Force and ask him for an engine. So Stuck goes to see this guy, Ernst Udet, who was a World War I fighter ace, and says, can I have one of the most fuck-off engines you've got to build this lad speed record car to go faster than Campbell and Seagrave and these bloody Englishmen? And Udet says, come and see me in 2 weeks, right? So when Stuck sees him in 2 weeks' time, he has not one, but two of these giant jet engines. So Stuck goes back to Hitler and says, can I do a boat as well? I want to do a boat as well. And I'm just like, that was the spirit, which, is just, it's Gatsby, right? It's not it's so to be like, and with our eyes, we look back and we say, well, should you really have been, so keen to do the land speed record that you were happy to drive a car with a swastika on it, even though you absolutely knew how evil the policies were and how they affected people? The Gestapo raided your hotel room one Monaco Grand Prix weekend. You knew what it was. So there's a lot of nuance there. And I was a butt munch to not properly review all the literature and miss this key book, which this German journalist had written about this very topic. So I don't know. I might read his book and be like, actually, I don't have anything valid to say. But I usually have a lot to say, don't I? So I see the time has run on as it usually does, Mark. I have a few quick fires here for us to wrap up with. What's the car you most regret parting with?
E773 NKV, Vulture Man, the Ford Sierra in gris, or whatever whatever version of grey it was, with the first car I owned. Loved it. I mean, the fact that it ended up all mouldy and we had to get rid of it. I mean, we did have to get rid of it, but if I could have a car back lurking on the drive, that would be the one.
Yeah, grey Sierra 2-litre base, wasn't it? It was rare in that it was a base. It never had any wheel caps all the time that you had it. Yeah. Yeah, a worthy choice. I test drove when I was a student a blue Ford Capri 3-litre S. It was lovely. It had that tartan interior, but blue. Nice. It was a T-plater. When I got back to the house and told the bloke I'd call him in the morning, he called me a door for being a time waster.
Oh dear.
And I really wish, because I really was in a place where, he was probably right that I probably wouldn't have bought the car, but I still felt, at the time, I looking back now, I wish I had gone with $100 in my pocket, because I'd have given him the money and then found a way to make the rest whole. But
mm-hmm.
But I don't know what I would have done with it, and I would have had to keep it outside, and I couldn't have insured it, and yeah. But
mate, I would have liked that Renault 5 Turbo, the baggy one that Angie's housemate had.
Yeah.
Was it reliable? No. Did it look just right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted it, but yeah, I didn't have
both facelifted in that same grey as your Sierra was. All right, worst car you ever owned?
I thought about that. I don't think I've owned a shit car. The worst car I've ever actually had for any period of time was when I swapped the Cupra R I had, that Seat Leon Cupra R, for my mate to drive it down to Le Mans. and had his dog-eared GTI in that awful era where Volkswagen were like doing the red. I think it was even before they were doing the red letters on the GTI that had actual different horsepower level, and it was just some baggy shit 130 horsepower piece of crap, and it was awful. That was horrendous.
Like a Golf
Yeah.
Mark IV or something.
Yeah, it was like ugly and slow and knackered, and I hated it.
No wonder he needed the Cupra to go to Le Mans.
Well, I mean, it was about 5 times the car in every way. It was just so much better looking, better performance, just better.
Most loyal dog?
I've never owned a dog.
No, not actual dog, like car.
I feel that ought to be. What can I remember the reg of this one? Was it R323CNE? That red Laguna company car I had. That was a beater of an old dog, and I kind of loved it. It was shit, but delivered in a sort of enthusiastic French way that made it good. You know, I liked it. It went dirty and handbrake turned regularly across the dirt drive to where I was living on that farm. Well, with you for some period of time. Yeah, I have fond memories of that car, even though it wasn't a good car, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the pool car.
Mm-hmm.
I would pick that black Mondeo ST24 that we use.
Bomber.
Yeah, that I use for. Well, we did 6,000 miles in that car between us, didn't we? Over 2 or 3 different summers before it succumbed to the great scrap man in the sky. But yeah, really sad to see that car go. Really wish I could have found a way to keep it. That Yamaha motor, what a gem! I mean, that was a fast car, utterly clapped out. I mean, we went together to look at it, didn't we? What did I pay? 350 quid for it, 320 quid, something like that. I did not pay a lot of money for it. What's the best road that you've driven in Europe? We talked about America a couple of, or maybe last time, didn't we? Best road.
Ooh, that's difficult. I mean, there's some excellent roads around the Nürburgring that are better than the Nürburgring in lots of ways. You could say Spa in that technically it used to be roads, but and that's cheating because it's a track, but it is amazing. I don't know. There are some great roads in the Alps. The road, if you don't take the Mont Blanc tunnel and you go up over the top instead from wherever. I'm trying to remember where we were, but doesn't really help people to find it on the map, unfortunately. If I can think of it, I'll put a link in it. But I had a wonderful period where I was driving that Megane RS, and about 8 bikes of various naked and sports bike types came past, and the gods were with me for a bit in terms of traffic flow, and I was able to sort of clip along behind them at about 95 to a ton 10 for about half an hour on sort of wonderful long sweeping roads, on the plain in between the sort of the mountaintop bits, just stunning. So, and some of the roads up out of Italy around Lake Como. Lake Como is just too nadgery, but there's some nice roads around there.
Como,
I haven't got a top road, to be honest. I need to work on it.
Como's where Caracciolo lived. That area.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah,
it's just gorgeous.
Lugano. So my pick's the Alps as well. I drove from Turin to Chambéry to retrace Giuseppe Farina, first Formula One world champion, to retrace his last drive. So he was invited to participate in John Frankenheimer's Grand Prix. And that morning he hopped in his Lotus Cortina in Turin and drove up over the Alps on his way to Reims, as I understand that you say it, and the French Grand Prix. And when they found the car, it was wrapped around a lamppost, and the speedo was pegged at 170 kilometers an hour. Which, if to understand it, that's about 115 miles an hour, which is about Lotus Cortina's maximum. So I think he hit ice. I think that, and Fangio famously said about he would, whenever Farina crashed, he would always think the Virgin was going to look after him. And Fangio's point was, I guess the Virgin stopped looking after him. When I drove the road, the Virgin had not stopped looking after him. He was doing what he loved. The car was in a full-blooded four-wheel drive with the throttle wide open, 115 miles an hour, and at 60, he hit the lamppost and died. End. The Virgin was with him to the very end. So the road, I think, is I bought an atlas of Italy, a road atlas of Italy in the 50s, and looked at the main road, and the road that I drove, I think it was SS20 or something like that, but it does, I should have planned this better, shouldn't I? But no, I followed a camper van up the hill in this little A3 diesel rental car that I had, poor thing. And the first climb, I was like, I'm not going to pass. But then the second switchback, it was a really long straight, and I thought, I'll pass. And when I passed the camper van, there was like nothing. There was no other traffic on that road. And I went up the switchbacks all the way up the hill, getting faster and faster and faster, and feeling like it was a computer game. And then over the top of the hill, coming out of Italy and into France, the road surface improved. And it was like a computer game with these sweeping down hills where you could look. I mean, I was doing racing lines, even though there was just sheer drop off. I wasn't like leaning on the car that hard, but it was because you could see right the way down, like that kind of Stelvio pass, but more open, less switchbacky and more and more open. And so the Alps are.
Well, yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I did some lovely driving in the Pyrenees last summer. There's some stunning roads down there as well. A lot of the little ones are just too small. They're beautiful views, pretty, but you can't really enjoy driving them because, single lane with passing places with no runoff, and it's
What's the best track in Britain?
I can only say the ones I've driven on, which is only a few. I've done Thruxton, I've done Brands Hatch Indy. The one I liked the most that I've driven was Donington.
There is a cheat here, isn't there? Is the TT course, really? But if you discount the TT course, I had Thruxton. I was between Thruxton and Alton. I think Alton's good. I've never done track day at Alton, so I don't really know. But but Thruxton is
Thruxton's quality, yeah.
You've got $100,000. What do you buy?
100 grand. What do I buy? What, in one thing, or am I buying a small garage full of?
Your choice.
Oh, and in which case I buy probably a nice tidy 997 GTS. Sorry, 997 Carrera S with the right kit on it, with the right alloys on it. I buy a dirt bike. I might even buy one of those BMW M1000Rs because I quite like the idea of that ridiculous 200 and something horsepower naked. Because increasingly sports bikes make less because they're even more ridiculous to ride than supercars, in the sense that you can get there even faster than the supercar to the not just the license losing, but to the the accident is wetto sort of time, even more scarily fast. But yeah, and then I don't know. I kind of like the idea of having one of those. If I can get a dog-eared 760 IL or M60 or something, M6 or something like that, so I can have a nice four-door car as well, but with ridiculous power, and then I'll keep the other 15 grand to put fuel in it for about 3 weeks.
Amen. I would do, and I did. This is like an off the cuff. I've not thought too deeply about this. I would do. I really want a dually Ram. I've not got out of the way of. I know exactly the year and the spec that I want. It's taken me a long time to get, but I really would love a 2-wheel drive extended cab 2016-17 dually Ram. I would also do, and not least because I feel like I missed the boat on this, I would love a really nice, original, daily drivable well, not daily drivable, but like usable, like the cars that I drive every day are muscle car. I kind of I would do a Firebird, but it's too much like the Camaro. I would really love a Boss Mustang, like a 69, 70 Boss 302 Mustang with a 4-speed, of course. I feel there's a timelessness about them. I feel something of a Mustang fraud, having only had, you know, later era ones that are like a reflection and a reference to the earlier ones. So I would like I'd like to do something like that. You know what I was going to say? We talked about the scariest moment you've ever had in a car, and I was going to do a little reprise of that. I can't remember what I said when we talked about it before, but I actually think when I pranged that white Sierra that we both owned. No, I also had a pretty terrifying moment in the era of the Econoline Club Wagon van, 1992 twin toe brown, Stanford excess property auction, $720. Do you remember? Well, you maybe don't, because you maybe didn't know Jason at that time, but our buddy Jason has who I lived with for a while, used to have Volvo 240 station wagons, because you could pick them up cheap and you could fit a bike in the back of them. And Jason was all about the bike racing. So that was the criteria. So when I first moved to California, I helped him with the running costs of the 240 that he had at the time. And the brakes started to grind. And he said to me, don't worry about it. The brakes can grind forever and it's fine. Like, I've had 2 other Volvos and the brakes can grind forever and it's fine. And the brakes ground forever and it was fine. And eventually we did them. So I was like, the brakes can grind forever, right? That was my thought with the van. Well, I'm telling you, they can't, because the pedal went to the fucking floor when I was trying to slow from like 80 to like, 60 to merge with traffic, to an extent that I abandoned any attempt to merge and continued on, because literally the pedal just went straight to the floor and I pumped and nothing happened. The pedal so that was a pretty sphincter clenching moment.
Yeah, that would pucker one up, wouldn't it? Yeah.
What are you reading at the moment? We're plugging the book. You're not reading anything because
I am. I've just been spending all my time writing and editing and writing and
the Chronicles of Alvar and Clarence. Go to Amazon and buy it now. I am reading a biography of David Pearson called 21 Forever. And motor racing biographies are often lightweight. And I think this qualifies as the most lightweight motor racing biography I think I've ever read. And I think the real tragedy is this is apparently the only one. There are no other. Maybe he was as simple as he comes across. I don't mean simple as in dumb. Maybe he was as much like a character in a country music song as he seems to be. I don't know. It's I crave more depth. There's more depth with Junior Johnson. There's more depth with Richard Petty. I'm struggling to find it with this David Pearson biography. All right. Really appreciate your time again, Mark. We've just ticked over.
It's all good, man.
Have a good one, and I'll speak to you next time. Ciao.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.